Sekigahara, the 21st of October, 1600, first wave. 7 enemy samurai surrounded Kaito, the strongest warrior from his dojo, undefeated in sparring, perfect technique, perfect discipline. He raised his sword, flawless stance. The first strike came high. He blocked perfectly. The second came from behind. His body froze. His rigid stance couldn't pivot. A blade slashed across his ribs. Pain exploded. Blood. He tried to recover, but his perfect technique only worked in perfect conditions. This was chaos. 3 more strikes. His armor cracked. He dropped to one knee. 30 seconds. The strongest warrior broken. 10 feet away, a smaller samurai named Riku flowed through 7 attackers like water around stones. No perfect form, just constant movement. He survived. Kaito stared. How? 3 months earlier, their master had stood before them both. Which of you will survive the battle that's coming? Kaito. I will, master. I'm stronger, faster, more disciplined. The master shook his head. You are as rigid as iron, beautiful, strong, but iron breaks. He gestured to Riku. He is soft like water. Water cannot be broken. It flows. It adapts. It survives. Kaito hadn't believed him. Now, bleeding on the battlefield, he understood. This is Mizu no Kokoro, mind like water, the principle that kept samurai alive when strength failed. The warriors who survived Sekigahara weren't the strongest. They were the most adaptive, not iron, water. And right now, you're iron. Rigid in your work, your relationships, your thinking. You believe strength means never bending. But rigidity is exactly what's breaking you. The question is, are you ready to become water? But before we continue, like the video, subscribe to the channel. This is how you help us grow and bring you more warrior wisdom. Now, let me tell you how Kaito learned to flow. Chapter 1. The Awakening. The Rigid Warrior. Mino Province. January 1600. Kaito was 24 years old when he learned that excellence can become a prison. He trained since childhood under Master Tessien at the Shinkaja-ryu dojo. Every morning at dawn, 1,000 overhead cuts. Perfect form, no deviation, no shortcuts. Every technique was executed flawlessly. Every stance precise. Every movement is controlled. The other students called him Iron Kaito. Not an insult, a compliment. He was unbreakable, unmovable, perfect. During sparring, opponents couldn't penetrate his defense. His strikes were lightning fast. His footwork is impeccable. He won every match through superior technique, superior discipline, and superior strength. Master Tessien watched him with an expression Kaito couldn't read. Pride or concern? One evening after training, the master called him aside. Kaito, you're the finest technical swordsman I've trained in 40 years. Kaito bowed deeply. Thank you, master. But I have a question. Tessien picked up 2 objects from his desk. A beautifully forged iron rod, perfectly straight, perfectly hard, and a leather cord, soft, flexible, unimpressive. Which is stronger? The iron, obviously. The master bent the leather cord easily. Then he tried to bend the iron. It remained rigid. He applied more pressure, still rigid. Then he struck it hard against the floor. The iron snapped in 2. The leather cord remained intact. Kaito, you are like this iron. Beautiful, strong, perfect. But you have a fatal weakness. What weakness? You cannot adapt. You've trained in perfect conditions against cooperative opponents, using predictable techniques. You've never faced chaos, never faced the unpredictable, never been forced to abandon your perfect form. Kaito felt defensive. My discipline is my strength. Your discipline is iron, and iron breaks. The master paused. War is coming, Kaito. The country is dividing. Tokugawa Ieyasu in the east, Ishida Mitsunari in the west. There will be battle, and battle is nothing like the dojo. I'm ready. No, you're perfectly prepared for a fight that doesn't exist, and completely unprepared for the one that does. That night, Kaito couldn't sleep. The master's words echoed, "You cannot adapt." But adaptation seemed like a weakness, like abandoning discipline, like compromising excellence. He'd spent 20 years building strength through rigidity, through perfect repetition, through never bending. How could that be wrong? 3 months later, news arrived. The Eastern and Western armies were gathering. Lord Tokugawa's forces would meet Ishida's army at Sekigahara in the province of Mino, the battle that would decide the fate of Japan. Kaito's lord sided with the Eastern forces. The dojo would send 20 warriors, Kaito among them. Before they left, Master Tesshin called the group together. His eyes found Kaito. "Those of you who survive will not be the strongest. You'll be the most adaptable." The words meant nothing to Kaito then. They would mean everything later. Chapter 2. The Principle. Mizu no Kokoro. 2 weeks before the battle. A mountain temple. Master Tesshin led Kaito and 3 other students on a pilgrimage to a Zen temple in the mountains. Before battle, you need wisdom, not technique. They arrived at sunset. The head monk, an old man named Ryutan, greeted them. That evening, Ryutan led them to a waterfall behind the temple. The sound was deafening. The spray is cold and sharp. "Tomorrow at dawn, you will stand under this waterfall. This is Misogi purification. But it's more than that. It's a teaching." The next morning, Kaito stripped to his waist and stepped into the freezing water. The waterfall crashed onto his shoulders like 1,000 hammers. He resisted, tensed his muscles, fought the water, tried to remain unmoved like iron. The pain was unbearable. Every muscle screamed. His body trembled, but he refused to move, refused to bend. After 5 minutes, Ryutan called him out. "You fought the water. I endured it." "No, you resisted it. Watch." Riku, the weak student, stepped under the waterfall, but instead of tensing, he relaxed. His body moved with the water. When the force pushed him, he yielded. When it lessened, he straightened. He stayed under the waterfall for 20 minutes. When he emerged, he wasn't exhausted. He was calm. "What did you learn?" Ryutan asked Kaito. "That I'm stronger. I can endure more pain." "Wrong. You learned nothing." The monk sat down. "Come, I'll explain what you refuse to see." They sat before a small pond. The surf was perfectly still, reflecting the sky. Ryutan threw a stone into the water. Ripples spread outward. The reflection was distorted. Then gradually, the water returned to stillness. "This is Mizu no Kokoro. Mind like water. Do you know what it means?" Kaito shook his head. "Water has 3 qualities. First, it adapts. Pour it into a cup, and it becomes the cup. Pour it into a bottle, and it becomes the bottle. It never resists its container. Second, it flows. When you place a rock in a stream, the water doesn't fight the rock. It flows around it. The rock remains. The water continues. Third, it reflects. When water is still, it reflects reality perfectly. When it's disturbed, the reflection distorts. When it returns to stillness, truth returns." Ryutan looked at Kaito directly. "You are not water. You are ice, rigid, inflexible, beautiful in form. But when pressure comes, when heat comes, you don't adapt. You break." "But Master, I've been taught that discipline means never bending." Discipline means training the mind to respond appropriately, not training the body to resist everything. Master Tesshin, who had been listening, spoke. "Kaito, I've taught you the technique. Ryutan is teaching you something deeper. In the dojo, you face known opponents using known techniques. You can be rigid because the situation is controlled. But in battle, chaos reigns. Enemies attack from unexpected angles. Your sword breaks, your footing fails, your plan crumbles. In those moments, rigidity kills, adaptation saves." Ryutan continued. "The samurai who survive are not the strongest. They're the ones who flow. When pushed, they yield. When pulled, they advance. When the situation changes, they change. This is Mizu no Kokoro. This is what Miyamoto Musashi meant when he wrote in the Book of Five Rings. In battle, become the water, adapt to the enemy's shape, flow into the gaps, strike from unexpected angles. He gestured to the pond. You must train your mind to be like this water, still and clear when possible, adaptive when necessary, never resisting what cannot be changed. Kaito felt something crack inside him, not understanding yet, just recognition that everything he'd built might be wrong. How do I train this? You already know how. You felt it before. When? Think. When have you ever moved without thinking? When has your body responded perfectly without your mind controlling it? Kaito remembered. Once, during training, an unexpected attack came from behind. He'd moved, not consciously, but automatically, perfectly. His body flowed. No thought, no resistance. Just a response. Yes, Ryutan smiled. That's Mizu no Kokoro. You've touched it once. Now you must learn to live there. Throughout history, warriors across all time have faced this same truth. That true strength isn't rigidity, it's adaptability. And in your own life, in your own time, others seek this same wisdom. At Presence and Purpose, we keep this teaching alive, not as ancient history, but as practice. The way of water flowing with what is, adapting to what comes, remaining unbroken through flexibility. If you feel called to this path, if Kaito's struggle mirrors your own rigidity, walk with us. Kaito bowed. He didn't fully understand yet, but something had shifted. For the first time in his life, he questioned whether strength meant never bending. The final push. What happened next, Kaito would barely remember. Not because of trauma, because he'd finally achieved true Mizu, no Kokoro. His conscious mind turned off, his trained body took over. Every opponent is different, every situation unique. His response was perfectly adapted to each. He didn't think, that's a high strike, use this block. He just moved, flowed. The high strike met water flowing low. The thrust met water, redirecting. The grab met water slipping away. His technique was imperfect, his form is inconsistent, but his effectiveness was absolute. Beside him, Riku fought the same way. Two warriors flowing like water in a stream, not coordinating consciously, just responding naturally to the same current. Master Teshin moved through the chaos like a leaf on wind. 70 years old, not strong, but unstoppable, because water has no age, only flow. The enemy broke against them like waves against the shore. Not because they were stronger, because they were adaptive. As sunset approached, the Western forces collapsed, generals surrendering, soldiers fleeing. The battle was over. Tokugawa had won. The Eastern forces controlled Japan, and Kaito stood alive, barely believing it. Not the strongest warrior in the unit, not the most skilled, but surviving nonetheless, because he'd learned to flow. Chapter 3. The Test. Learning to flow. 1 week before the battle. Training at the temple. Ryutan designed a training completely unlike anything Kaito had experienced. No kata, no predetermined forms, only response to what is. The training was simple but brutal. Kaito would stand in the center of a circle. 4 monks with wooden swords would attack randomly from any direction at any time. No pattern, no warning, no rules. You cannot predict. You can only flow. Like water. Day 1. Disaster. Kaito tried to use his perfect technique, but the attacks came too randomly. When he focused on one opponent, another struck from behind. When he established his stance, an attack from an unexpected angle forced him to abandon it. Within minutes, he'd been struck a dozen times. His perfect defense is useless. His disciplined technique is irrelevant. He tried harder, tensed more, fought to maintain control. It only got worse. The more he resisted the chaos, the more the chaos overwhelmed him. After an hour, Ryutan stopped the training. What happened? I couldn't maintain my form. The attacks were too random. Exactly. You cannot maintain form in chaos. You can only flow with chaos. Day 2. Riku demonstrated. The smaller, weaker student stepped into the circle. The same random attacks came, but Riku didn't fight them. When an attack came from the left, his body flowed left. When pressure came from behind, he spun and redirected. He never tried to maintain a perfect stance. He never resisted the momentum. His movements looked sloppy compared to Kaito's perfect form, but he avoided most strikes. And when he was hit, he rolled with the impact, never taking the full force. "Do you see?" Ryutan asked. Kaito saw. But understanding and doing are different. Day 3. The breakthrough began. Ryutan changed the exercise. "Close your eyes." "What?" "You rely on seeing attacks coming. That's why you tense. You're trying to predict. Instead, feel. The air moves before the strike. Your body knows before your eyes see. Trust it." Kaito closed his eyes. The first attack came. His mind panicked. He couldn't see, couldn't predict, couldn't prepare. But his body moved. Not perfectly, but it moved. Over and over. Sometimes he was struck, but sometimes increasingly, his body flowed out of the way before his mind even processed the attack. "This is Mushin," Ryutan said. "No mind, the mind that doesn't stop to think. That's the gateway to Mizu no Kokoro." Day 5. Integration. Something shifted. Kaito stopped trying to win, stopped trying to look good, stopped trying to maintain his perfect form. He just responded. Attack from the right, flow right. Attack from above, sink below. Multiple attackers moved to create single angles. His movements weren't as technically perfect as before, but they were effective, more effective. After the session, Master Teshin spoke. "Now you understand why the Master said Riku would survive and you would die. Not because he's better, because he's water. But Master, doesn't this mean abandoning all the discipline you taught me?" "No. It means applying discipline differently. Your technique is still there. Your training is still there. But now it serves adaptation instead of perfection. Think of it this way. For 20 years, you've built a vocabulary of techniques, perfect techniques, but you only knew one way to use them in predetermined sequences, in controlled conditions. Now you're learning the language itself, how to use any technique in any situation, how to combine them spontaneously, how to abandon them when necessary. The technique doesn't change, but your relationship to technique transforms. You hold it lightly instead of gripping it tightly," Ryutan added. "Mizu no Kokoro doesn't mean having no form. Water has no fixed form, but it always takes the most appropriate form for the situation. Cup, bottle, stream, ocean water becomes what it needs to be. You must be the same. In this moment, this form. In that moment, that form. In chaos, formless. In stillness, perfectly formed." Day 7. Final test. Kaito stood in the circle, eyes open this time. 4 monks are attacking with full speed and unpredictability. And for the first time in his life, he flowed. Not thinking, not planning, not predicting, just responding. His body moved like water. When pushed, he yielded. When pulled, he advanced. When surrounded, he found the gaps. When struck, he absorbed and redirected. It wasn't perfect. He was still hit. But he was adapting, flowing, surviving. When it ended, Kaito was exhausted but exhilarated. For the first time, he'd touched something beyond perfect technique. He'd touched real adaptability. Master Teshin placed a hand on his shoulder. "Now you're ready. Not for a perfect battle, for real battle." But Kaito had no idea what real battle truly meant. The test at the temple was controlled. The monks pulled their strikes. The ground was level. The stakes were training. At Sekigahara, none of that would be true. And water mind or not, Kaito would face a test that would either validate everything he'd learned or prove it was all illusion. Chapter 4. Warrior Psychology. The Science of Adaptation. The night before departure for battle, Master Teshin and Ryutan sat with the warriors, explaining the deeper truth behind Mizu no Kokoro. Tonight I'll explain why water mind saves warriors when strength fails. The neuroscience of rigidity. Your brain creates patterns through repetition. Every technique you've practiced 10,000 times, your brain has wired that movement deeply. This is good. This is mastery. But there's a cost. When you train only in perfect conditions, your brain learns, this technique works in this situation. The neural pathway is specific, limited. When the situation changes, different terrain, multiple opponents, weapon breaks, injured body, your brain searches for the pattern, can't find it, freezes. This is what modern neuroscience will call cognitive rigidity, the inability to adapt when established patterns fail. And in combat, cognitive rigidity is death. Ryutan continued. But water mind trains different neural pathways. Not this technique in this situation. Instead, adapt to any situation. When you train with eyes closed, with random attacks, with broken patterns, you're teaching your brain to function without predetermined pathways. You're building what they'll call cognitive flexibility. The samurai didn't know this science, but they understood the principle. Musashi spent years in random duels against different styles. Why? To prevent rigidity, to maintain adaptability. Musashi's complete teaching. Master Tesshin read from a scroll, the Book of Five Rings, Water Book. Musashi writes, the spirit of water takes any shape. Sometimes a trickle, sometimes a wild sea. Water has a clear blue color. Taking its clarity as the base, I shall explain my school. In my school, the mind must be like water. When water is placed in a square container, it becomes square. When placed in a round container, it becomes round. Water is more versatile than any other element. But here's the deeper wisdom most miss. Musashi also writes, learn your techniques so well that you can forget them in battle. This is the essence. If you think about techniques, you're already lost. The mind must be empty and full simultaneously. Empty of thought, full of possibility. This is Mizu no Kokoro combined with Mushin, water mind and no mind. Together, they create perfect adaptability. The Stoic parallel. The ancient Stoics, Roman philosophers you'll learn about, understood a similar truth. Marcus Aurelius wrote, the mind adapts and converts to its own purposes, the obstacle to our acting. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This is water flowing around rock. The obstacle becomes an opportunity. Resistance becomes redirection. Epictetus taught, don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do happen, and you will go on well. This is accepting the container you're poured into, not resisting reality, adapting to what is. The psychological mechanism. Why does water mind work? 3 reasons. First, reduces cognitive load. When you stop trying to control everything, your mind has the capacity to perceive everything. You see more because you're attached to less. Second, enables flow state. Athletes call it the zone. When your conscious mind quiets and your trained body takes over, water mind is the gateway to this state. Third, eliminates fear of failure. When you accept you can't control outcomes, only responses, fear loses power. You stop worrying about maintaining perfection and start focusing on surviving. Ryutan added, there's a concept in Zen, die before going into battle. What does this mean? It means accept death completely. When you've already died mentally, you can no longer be threatened by death. You become free to respond appropriately without fear controlling you. Water has no fear. Water doesn't worry about the container it's poured into. Water accepts, adapts, and continues flowing. When you develop water mind, you become the same. No resistance to reality, total acceptance of what is, complete adaptation to what comes. The combat application. Master Tesshin demonstrated with Kaito. In perfect dojo conditions, your iron technique is superior to water mind. You're faster, stronger, more precise. He attacked Kaito with a slow, predictable overhead strike. Kaito blocked perfectly. But in battle, Tesshin suddenly changed the attack mid-strike, swept Kaito's legs, and put the bokken to his throat. Reality doesn't cooperate. The warrior with rigid technique expects the overhead strike and can't adapt when it changes. The warrior with water mind sees the change happening and flows with it. Tomorrow, at Sekigahara, you'll face terrain you've never seen. Opponents are using unknown techniques. Weapons breaking. Allies falling. Plans crumbling. Chaos everywhere. Your perfect technique will fail within minutes, but if you've developed water mind, you'll adapt, flow, survive. The final wisdom. Here's what the samurai knew. What Musashi proved through 60 undefeated duels. What kept warriors alive through the bloodiest battles. The strongest warrior is not the one who never bends. It's the one who bends in every direction without breaking. Iron is stronger than water until pressure comes. Then iron shatters, and water remains. Kaito listened, understanding intellectually. But true understanding would only come when steel clashed with steel, when blood soaked the ground, when chaos descended. At Sekigahara, theory would become reality, and only the water would survive. Chapter 5. The First Transformation. The battle begins. The 21st of October, 1600. Dawn. Sekigahara. 160,000 warriors gathered in the valley, the largest samurai battle in history. Eastern forces under Tokugawa Ieyasu on one side, Western forces under Ishida Mitsunari on the other hand. The future of Japan would be decided by sunset. Kaito stood with his unit 20 warriors from Master Teshin's dojo. His heart pounded, his hands were steady, but his mind raced. Around him, the valley was filled with armed men, banners everywhere, the sound of armor, horses, and drums. This was nothing like the dojo, nothing like the controlled temple training. The first attack came from the west. Ishida's forces charged. The sound was deafening, thousands of men screaming battle cries, running forward with spears and swords. Kaito's unit formed defensive positions. His training is activated. Perfect stance, perfect grip, ready. The enemy crashed into them like a wave. And immediately, everything Kaito knew fell apart. His perfect stance was useless, the ground was uneven, muddy from rain. His perfect grip was compromised, his hands were sweating, shaking. His perfect technique encountered an opponent who didn't fight like a dojo student. The enemy samurai was wild, unpredictable. He attacked high, then immediately low. He feinted left, then struck right. He used his shoulder as a weapon, his helmet as a shield. Kaito tried to respond with his trained techniques, but everything required perfection, perfect footing, perfect distance, perfect timing. He had none of those. Within seconds, the enemy's sword slashed across his arm. Not deep, but shocking. First blood, first pain, first proof that his training was insufficient. Panic rose. His mind scrambled for the right technique, but there was no right technique for this chaos. Then something happened. He remembered the waterfall, the pain of resisting, the relief of yielding. He stopped trying to use the perfect technique, stopped trying to maintain his stance. When the enemy pushed forward aggressively, Kaito didn't resist. He yielded backward, created distance, and redirected the momentum. When the enemy feinted left, Kaito didn't commit to blocking left. He stayed neutral, waited for the actual attack, then flowed with it. His movements weren't pretty, weren't perfect, but they worked. The enemy grew frustrated. His wild attacks were hitting nothing but air. Kaito flowed around each one like water around a stone. Then an opening appeared. The enemy overextended. Kaito didn't think, just responded. His sword found the gap. The enemy fell. Kaito stood there breathing hard. He'd survived, not through perfect technique, through adaptation. But the battle had just begun. 3 hours later, the fighting was brutal. Kaito's unit had been pushed back, scattered, and reformed. Half the men were wounded or dead. The ground was slick with blood, bodies everywhere. The formations had dissolved into small clusters, fighting desperately. Kaito found himself surrounded by 3 enemy warriors. In the dojo, this would be a test he could handle. But here, exhausted, injured, terrified, his iron training screamed at him to maintain defensive position. But a defensive position meant death. 3 opponents could rotate, wear him down, and create openings. Water wouldn't defend. Water would flow, find the gaps, move. So Kaito moved, not away into the space between 2 opponents, created an angle where only one could attack at a time. When that one struck, Kaito redirected the attack into the second opponent's path. Chaos. Confusion. He flowed like water, finding the lowest path. Not fighting the current, using it. Within moments, 2 enemies had struck each other. The third hesitated. Kaito pressed the advantage. He survived. Again, through adaptability, not strength. Master Tesshin appeared beside him, bloody but alive. You're flowing. I'm surviving. Same thing. The master smiled grimly. This is what iron cannot do. Break and remain broken, or flow and remain whole. Around them, the battle raged. But Kaito had transformed. For the first time, he understood that Mizu no Kokoro wasn't weakness disguised as strength. It was the only real strength, the strength to survive when everything else fails. But the battle was far from over. And what came next would test whether his transformation was deep enough to carry him through hell. But surviving the morning was just the beginning. What Kaito didn't know, what none of the warriors knew, was that the real battle would come when everything seemed won, when exhaustion dulled the mind, when vigilance dropped, when the water would have to flow one more time. Because the deadliest moment in battle isn't the first clash, it's the moment after you think you've survived, when relief replaces awareness, when you stop flowing and freeze. And at Sekigahara, that moment was coming for everyone. Chapter 6. Deep Training Arc. The water becomes still. Afternoon. The battle shifts. By midday, the Eastern forces were winning. Several Western generals had betrayed Ishida and switched sides. The momentum turned decisively toward Tokugawa. Kaito's unit regrouped on a hill. The fighting had moved down into the valley. For the first time in hours, there was space to breathe. Master Tesshin gathered the survivors, 12 of the original 20. Rest, drink water, eat if you can. This may be our only chance. Kaito collapsed against a tree. His body screamed, every muscle is exhausted. Multiple wounds, none fatal, but each draining him. Around him, men treated injuries, checked weapons, stared at the carnage below with hollow eyes. Riku sat beside him. The weak student had survived. More than survived, he was barely wounded. While stronger warriors had fallen, he'd flowed through the chaos unharmed. You understand now, Riku said quietly. Understand what? Why the master said I'd survive and you'd die? Kaito nodded. But I adapted. I learned. I'm still here. You touched Mizu no Kokoro, but you haven't mastered it. Riku looked at him seriously. The hardest part isn't flowing in chaos. It's staying flowing after the chaos ends. What do you mean? Right now, you're relaxing, tensing again, becoming rigid again. Because the immediate threat is gone, your mind thinks it can return to iron. But water doesn't become ice when the storm passes. Water remains water always, through storms and stillness, through chaos and peace. If you return to rigidity now, when the next wave comes, and it will come, you'll freeze. And freezing in battle is death. Master Tesshin overheard. Riku speaks wisdom. The difference between touching a principle and living a principle is this: consistency. He sat down beside them. I've seen many warriors learn to adapt in desperate moments. Survival instinct forces it. But after survival, they return to old patterns, rigid again, controlled again. Mizu no Kokoro isn't just a technique for crisis. It's a way of being. Constant, unchanging in its changing, always ready to flow. Kaito felt it. The old patterns are trying to reassert. The comfort of perfect technique, the safety of predetermined responses. But he also felt the truth. In the valley below, chaos could erupt again at any moment. If he let himself become rigid, he'd be as vulnerable as he'd been at dawn. So how do I stay water even now? Zazen, Master Teshin said. Even here, especially here, he demonstrated. Sitting in proper meditation posture, eyes half closed, breathing controlled. 5 minutes. Return your mind to stillness. Not rigid stillness, water stillness. The pond reflects reality clearly. Kaito closed his eyes, tried to meditate, but his mind raced. Images from the battle, faces of fallen comrades, the enemy he'd killed, the terror, the exhaustion. Don't resist the thoughts, Teshin's voice. Let them pass like clouds reflected on water. The water doesn't cling to clouds. Neither should your mind cling to thoughts. Gradually, the racing slowed. The images came and went. Kaito watched them without attachment, like watching reflections pass across a still pond. Fear came. He acknowledged it. Didn't cling to it. It passed. Exhaustion came. He acknowledged it. Didn't fight it. It remained, but didn't control him. Readiness came. He acknowledged it. Didn't force it. It settled into him naturally. When he opened his eyes, something had shifted. He was still exhausted, still wounded, still afraid. But he wasn't rigid. He was water, tired water perhaps, but still capable of flowing. Riku smiled. Now you're learning the second level, flowing in stillness. What's the third level? Teaching others to flow. Before Kaito could respond, a shout came from the valley. The battle was shifting again. Western forces are making a desperate final push. Weapons ready, Master Teshin commanded. This is the last wave. After this, Tokugawa wins, or everyone dies trying. The warriors stood. Kaito gripped his sword, but this time he didn't tense, didn't prepare a perfect stance, didn't plan his first technique. He simply stood, breathing, present, ready to respond to whatever came. As water poured into a cup, he would take the shape of the moment. Like water hitting rock, he would flow around obstacles. Like water in stillness, he would reflect reality clearly and respond appropriately. The enemy charged up the hill, and Kaito flowed down to meet them. Chapter 7. The Final Confrontation. When water meets ice. Evening. The battlefield quiets. Bodies everywhere, tens of thousands dead, the ground soaked with blood. The air was thick with smoke and death. Kaito sat among the survivors. Of the 20 warriors from their dojo, 7 remained. Master Teshin, Riku, Kaito, 4 others, 13 dead, the strongest warriors among them. The rigid ones, the iron ones, the ones who'd relied on perfect technique and superior strength. All dead, while the adaptive ones survived. As darkness fell, a lone Western warrior appeared limping, bleeding, but still armed. He'd been left behind in the retreat. Now he faced the Eastern warriors with desperate eyes. Most of the surviving soldiers ignored him. The battle was over. Why risk death now? But one samurai stepped forward. A warrior from another unit. Large, heavily armored, famous for strength. "I'll kill this one," he announced. "One more for glory." The Western warrior raised his sword weakly. He was finished, exhausted, wounded. No chance. The large samurai charged confidently. His technique was perfect. His power is overwhelming. His strike came down like a hammer. But the Western warrior moved, not blocking, not resisting, flowing. The strike missed by inches. The Western warrior's body had somehow flowed around it like water around stone. The large samurai struck again, faster, harder, full power. Again, the Western warrior flowed. Not fighting, just adapting. The large samurai grew frustrated, angry. He abandoned the technique. Pure aggression. Wild strikes trying to crush this irritating opponent who wouldn't stand and fight properly. And that's when the Western warrior struck. One precise counter. The large samurai fell. Silence. Kaito watched, understanding completely. The large samurai was iron, strong, rigid, perfect in controlled conditions. But when faced with water with complete adaptability, his strength became weakness. The Western warrior collapsed afterward, too wounded to continue. But he'd proven the principle. Master Teshin called out in the darkness, "Warrior, what is your name?" The Western warrior looked up. "Yukimura. I served. Lord Ishida. You fight with Mizu no Kokoro." Yukimura's eyes widened. "You know the teaching?" "We all know the teaching." Teshin gestured to Kaito and the others. "We're all water here." He walked over and offered water to Yukimura. "The battle is over. You fought with honor. Your adaptability kept you alive when strength would have killed you." "Not alive enough," Yukimura said, looking at his wounds. "I won't see morning." "Then hear this before the end. You proved what the samurai have always known. The warrior who survives isn't the strongest or the fastest. It's the one who flows." Yukimura smiled weakly. "My master taught me that. Be like water," he said. "I thought he was teaching weakness. Now I know he was teaching survival." "Not just survival," Master Teshin corrected. "True strength. The only strength that matters." They sat with Yukimura through the night, enemies by allegiance, brothers by philosophy, united by understanding that Mizu no Kokoro transcends sides. By dawn, Yukimura was dead, but his final words stayed with Kaito forever. "I survived 100 battles before this one, not through superior technique, through water mind. Today I finally met warriors who understand. I can die satisfied, knowing the teaching continues." Master Teshin spoke to the group. "Remember this. At Sekigahara, the strongest warriors died first. The most rigid died fastest. But those who flowed east or west, allied or enemy, those survived longest. War doesn't care about your technique. Reality doesn't respect your perfection. Life itself is chaos, and in chaos, only water survives." "Kaito," the master looked at him directly, "you came here as iron. Beautiful iron. Perfect iron. But iron that would have shattered in the first hour. Instead, you learned to flow. You touched Mizu no Kokoro. You adapted. You survived. But here's the final lesson. The battle is over. You'll return home. Return to the dojo. Return to controlled conditions. And every instinct will tell you to return to iron, to rigid discipline, to perfect technique. Don't. Stay water. Always. Through peace and war. Through success and failure. Through order and chaos. Because life is battle. Every day. Different enemies. Different terrain. Constant change. If you become rigid again, you'll die, maybe not physically, but spiritually. You'll break under pressure that water would flow around." Kaito looked at the battlefield, at the tens of thousands who'd died, at the handful who'd survived. He understood now. Completely. Not intellectually. In his bones. The samurai who lived weren't lucky. They'd mastered the one thing that mattered: adaptability. The warrior truth. 3 days later, the journey home. As they walked back toward Mino province, Master Teshin taught the deeper truth. "Kaito, you've learned Mizu no Kokoro in battle, but most warriors make a mistake now. They think water mind is only for extreme situations, for chaos, for combat. So they return to normal life and become rigid again. Save flexibility for emergencies. This is wrong. Water is water always, in storm and stillness, in the ocean and cup, in battle and peace." Here's what the samurai understood, what Musashi proved, what Yukimura died knowing. Life itself is the battle. Every moment, every interaction, every challenge. When your plan fails, that's battle. Flow, adapt, don't resist. When relationships change, that's battle. Flow, adapt, don't cling. When your body ages, that's battle. Flow, adapt, don't deny. When certainty crumbles, that's battle. Flow, adapt, don't freeze. The warrior who practices Mizu no Kokoro only in crisis will die the moment crisis arrives, because you cannot suddenly become water. You must already be water. Riku added, "This is why I survived, Kaito. Not because I'm better, because I'm always water. In training, in rest, in peace, in war, always flowing." You became water when survival forced you. That's good. That's progress. But now you must choose to stay water even when survival doesn't force it. Master Teshin continued. The deepest truth, the one most warriors never learn. You think rigidity is discipline. You think flowing is a lack of control. But that's backwards. True discipline isn't holding rigid form. True discipline is training your mind to respond appropriately to any situation. That's harder than rigidity. That requires more control, not less. Iron is easy. Stay hard. Never bend. Simple. Water is difficult. Adapt constantly. Change shape continuously. Respond differently to every container. That's mastery. Musashi wrote, "You must practice constantly to maintain no fixed form." Do you understand? Maintaining formlessness requires more practice than maintaining form. This is the paradox. This is the warrior truth. The strongest mind is the most flexible mind. The most disciplined warrior is the most adaptive warrior. The unbreakable spirit is the one that bends in every direction. Without breaking, Kaito absorbed this, every word landing like truth he'd always known but never articulated. So Mizu no Kokoro isn't a technique. It's a way of being. Yes, it's not something I do in crisis. It's who I am always. Yes, and the training never ends, because water never becomes ice unless it dies. Exactly, Master Teshin smiled. Now you understand. Not just the principle. The life. They walked in silence for a while, the road home long, but Kaito felt light despite exhaustion. He'd survived Sekigahara, but more than that, he'd transformed. From iron to water, from rigid to fluid, from breakable to unbreakable. Not because he was stronger, because he'd learned the only strength that matters. The strength to adapt, to flow, to survive anything by never resisting anything. That's Mizu no Kokoro. That's the warrior's truth. Ending the samurai lesson. 10 years later. The same dojo. Kaito, now 34, sat before a young student. The boy's stance was perfect. His forest sem flawless. His technique is beyond his years. But Master Kaito, he'd inherited Teshin's position, saw the same rigidity he'd once carried. Takeru. Stand. The student stood with perfect posture. Your technique is excellent. The finest I've trained in years. The boy beamed with pride. But you have a fatal weakness. The smile vanished. Master Kaito stood and walked to a basin of water, placed his hand flat on the surface. Strike my hand. The student looked confused. Master? Use your perfect technique. Strike my hand. The boy struck, fast, hard, precise. The moment before impact, Kaito's hand flowed not away, but with the strike. Like water moving with the wind, the strike hit nothing but surface tension, no resistance, no impact. Again, the student struck harder. Same result, his perfect technique, hitting nothing. Why can't you hit me? Because you move? No, because you're rigid and I'm water. Kaito lifted his hand from the basin. For 10 years, I've practiced this. Every morning. Mizu no Kokoro. Mind like water. I learned this principle at Sekigahara, the largest battle in our history. I went there as iron, beautiful, strong, perfect, rigid. I would have died in the first hour. But I learned to flow, to adapt, to be water, and that's the only reason I survived. He looked at the student seriously. You're where I was. Excellent technique, rigid mind, and rigidity is death. Starting tomorrow, you'll train differently, not to perfect technique, to perfect adaptability. We'll practice with random attacks, unpredictable terrain, broken patterns, chaos. And you'll learn what I learned. What every samurai who survives learns. The warrior who never bends will break. The warrior who flows will never break. Throughout time, this teaching passes on. At presence and purpose, we walk this path together, not as ancient history, but as daily practice. The way of water flowing with what is, adapting to what comes. If you're ready to begin this practice, to train your mind like water, join us. Write your commitment in the comments. Make it real. The student bowed. Master Kaito, I'm ready to learn. Good. Kaito smiled. Let's begin with a waterfall. The teaching continued. The student became a teacher. The teacher became the student. And water flowed on. Walk with fluidity. Train with adaptation. Flow forever.